Okay, so good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Navionics webinar on fishing and boating smarter, co-sponsored by Seatow. This webinar is being recorded, so it'll be available on our website if you'd like to review it later. Those lucky attendees that are here will be receiving an email from Seatow for a 60-day trial membership to our great partner at Seatow. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen here and we'll get into a little bit about Navionics. I see a few questions popping up. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, so what we're going to talk about tonight is reading a chart for safer boating, but I'm also going to add in a lot about fishing, because if you understand the contours of boating safer, you'll also understand a little bit more about fishing and how to actually use and understand a Navionics chart. So a couple questions came up and said, what is Navionics? So just very briefly on who we are. Navionics we used to be a two-man show, started back in 1984, and believe it or not, actually created the first ever electronic chart. Today we employ over 500 enthusiastic people located in US, India, Italy, and we basically do charting for all around the world. What makes us a little different and why I personally enjoy working here at Navionics is that we aren't just sales guys or marketing people, but we're actually people that live this lifestyle. You know, we're out on the water, and you probably can see my reverse raccoon eyes here from my sunglasses. We're out on the water every chance we get. We're fishing, we're boating, we're fishing tournaments. So we not only talk about the product, but we use it. And I can tell you, if I don't get out at least once or twice a week, I will go insane. Hence why I live down here in Florida. Navionics also has the largest database of marine and lake charts. I did see a few people inland. I will try to address questions with that the best I can as far as inland. Most of this will be general contours. I know we have some other webinars coming up focused on bass, walleye, trout, crappies, and then of course we have some more dedicated to saltwater. I believe another Seatow webinar on redfish. Those of you that are aware of our app, we're actually at 4 million apps sold and the #1 navigation app. So why are we here tonight? Number one, of course, nobody wants this, you know, especially, well, really any of them. You know, the prop up there on the left is actually a buddy of mine that went to a lake without a chart. The sandbar one on the right, I don't think they're quite out playing floating beer pong, but that might have been avoided. And of course, the other two, we don't want to even think about those things happening. You know, so how do we boat safer and catch more fish? So topics tonight, talk a little bit about icons. These are all popular questions that I've gotten at shows or from emails or from previous webinars as to people want to know, you know, when they look at our chart or they look at our iPhone, you know, or their Droid, what are these things? How do I read them? What are these icons? You know, how do I update a chart? And what do these things really mean? So on icons, which we'll touch very briefly, is the icons that come up on your plotter, and I'm going to use our mobile app here, for example, indicate a lot of different things. You've got, and I'm not going to run through each individual one of these. We'll be here all night. You've got rocks, which obviously we want to avoid or possibly fish by. Bottom obstructions, wrecks, you know, wreck emerging, dangerous wrecks. You know, again, these things, one, you know, we want to make sure we avoid for safety, but also two, we want to make sure that, you know, or look at these for possible fish locations. You know, no matter where you are in the world, wrecks and structure draw fish. So it's like being in the desert. You know, you find an oasis or you find a tree, that's where animals typically are going to go. Otherwise, it's just sand. Same thing holds true for the ocean. Where there's structure, there's a wreck, there's a piece of bottom. It's in the middle of nowhere when there's, or I shouldn't say not in the middle of nowhere, but where there may not be a lot. Anywhere there's that piece of structure, this is where fish are going to be drawn to. So icons information, you've got text notes, there's fishing locations, there's diving spots, there's water turbulence, things that you need to be aware of that, you know, some guys might actually help you with some fishing spots. We certainly add some to our charts as far as wrecks and reefs. Buoys, obviously a concern for navigation. These are all the different buoys that are viewable on our chart as well as on the app. And shops and repairs. Anytime there's restaurant, tiki bars, we all want to know where they are. Marine shops, if you're looking for fishing equipment, dive shops, and hopefully you don't need repair shops, but that's all listed as well. Services, again, your water taxis, your boat ramps, and so forth. These are the different icons that appear on the Navionics chart. And again, you're more than welcome to take a look at this again and review them individually. but that gives you an idea of what these icons do. Updates. What do we do with updates as far as keeping safe and seeing where different fishing contours are? Is we do 10,000 updates per week. So when you buy a Navionics chart, you have 1 year of free updates, and you can update anytime you want online and get the latest information. We actually just launched, Ray Marine was about a year ago now, and you'll see coming from Lawrence very shortly, there's the plotter sync, which allows you to update on our app, go to your plotter on Wi-Fi, and then update your chart directly from Wi-Fi and be able to update with the newest information or transfer waypoints. Once you do it, you'll see that little white appear like that. That means you've updated that area. So government charts and embedded charts, and I want to explain all these things early on, and we'll talk a little bit more about contours and how to fish them. But these are all important to understand what the differences are as you're looking at your plotter. This is the government chart, and I put a green arrow here to look at this particular spot. And this was as a result now that's still on government charts from a while ago per Sandy that hit the Northeast. Navionics chart, you can see that's no longer there. This is important to know as far as the safety aspect, whether you're coming in or out. And of course, if you're fishing, because there is obviously some tide that's going to move in and out of there. And then on our sonar chart, for those of you that are not familiar with sonar chart, this is a very important piece of information. The sonar chart is our 1 foot contours. This gets updated from Navionics. It also gets updated from sonar logs that boaters like yourselves contribute. So we're going to talk a lot about looking at these contours here in a few slides coming up. But on your plotter, if you've got a new Ray Marine, it's under your chart options and it's labeled as sonar chart. If you have an older Ray Marine or Lawrence or Hummingbird, some of the other chart plotters, it's labeled as a fishing chip. So this is a very important if you are fishing. There's a lot of feature sets we're going to talk about and how to use this, but these are 1 foot contours. Very, very important when it comes to fishing. So one of the things you're able to do now on plotters on our mobile is the shallow area mode. So if you want to stay out of shallow areas, you're able to highlight this. In this case, I have the shallow area. You can see on the green arrow to the left at 12 foot. So anything less than 12 foot is green, or excuse me, has the red marks on there. See the red marks? Stay out of it. Just keeps you a little bit safer when you're on the water. Your depth highlight. Now this I find interesting for 2 reasons. One, if you're new to boating and you're trying to understand, hey, I want to boat safely when I'm in this area, you can take a look and you see the green off to the left on fishing range. 13 to 31 feet is where I highlighted. That tells me as long as I stay in that white, I know that I'm boating safely and I know that I'm not going to run aground, that this is the area that is best for me to be boating and cruising. So if you're new to boating, this is a great way to understand, where you need to boat and where the safest track is. Where this comes into play in fishing, now I kept the same at 19 to 33 feet, whether you're up north or down south or you're, whatever you're chasing. Right now where I'm at, cobia have just shown up. Cobia will usually follow a same contour. You find cobia in a depth of 30 feet, you're typically going to find some right along that same contour line. Now remember what I talked about. I said contour lines are very important. When you've got that 1 foot contour line, if you know those cobia are in 30 feet, you can stay right within that range, 25 to 35 feet, and follow that line. So in this example, I made a little larger of an area to kind of show off a little bit. 19 to 33 feet along the beach. That is in white. Stay in that area. That's the area that these fish are traveling. This is the area that I want to fish. Stripers are hanging out in an area that's, in sloughs that are 30 feet, you can change that range to go 30 to 35. It's going to highlight anywhere in white that's in that depth. If you're looking for lumps, I know we've got some freshwater guys on here. If you're looking for lumps and your lake is generally 50 feet and there's some lumps out there, you can say, you know what, I want to highlight lumps that are 30 to 40 feet. They're going to pop up white. This is the idea of the fishing smarter that you probably saw on the graphic from the last week. Spend a lot of time running around and looking and checking stuff out, but if you can narrow your window down by just highlighting those in white, you're now going to save yourself a lot of time. You're going to be fishing a lot smarter because you're going to know exactly where to go based on what that little white area is showing you. So get very familiar with the fishing range. It's very important when you're trying to really localize where you want to fish. Same thing if you're offshore. 100 to 130 feet or the mahi, highlight that in white, And you might actually see little cuts and ledges or little eddies, and we're going to talk about that here in a few slides on the importance of that. Water level adjusting on the Navionics app. This is for, in particular, our freshwater crew here that may be on the webinar. You can actually access this on our app. So what that allows you to do, I'm using the same shot as you saw earlier, you can adjust the water level. I know there's been a lot of rain out on the West Coast, for example. In this case, I moved everything 11 feet. So now that's changed all of my contour depths to what it should be is 11 feet higher. So if it was 20 foot, obviously it's 31 now. If there's a drought, a lot of water low here in Florida, I changed it down 10 feet. So you can now see how land is expanded out in the yellow, showing that the water level is down 10 feet. Why is this important? Obviously, one, safety. You can also see where that water color changes blue a little bit right there. That's telling you it's shallower water. But also it helps things stand out. Take a look right where you see breakers towards the middle here. I don't know if you can see my cursor. But right here, this little white area, that's a deep hole. So that now is a hole that has appeared from the water level dropping 10 feet. So now I know, chances are, there's fish possibly congregated in that area. So the water level feature is great for safety, but also, again, in helping out different areas. Here's one down where you see the right whale critical habitat, which is blue. There's a shallow water lump. Shallow water lumps are a structure. Again, helping you to fish smarter, understanding where to go. Drying areas, maybe not as important unless you're looking for redfish, but drying areas obviously very important when you're looking at boating safety. Anywhere you see in the green here is where you've got a drying area. Drying areas are important to, I just saw something pop up, I'm gonna address that in a second. Drying area here are important because this is areas that when it's low tide, they're exposed. You're gonna run aground. When high water's there, they're covered up. So if you're doing some shallow water fishing, or if you're clamming or crabbing, these drying areas can be good for clamming and crabbing, or fishing redfish or your shallow water species. Snook might sit off the end of it. But again, when you're boating, you wanna make sure you're careful to avoid those areas. One quick thing, I saw quite a few people sign on here in the last 15 minutes. Those of you that signed off, thank you, or signed on, excuse me, thank you for attending. Just a quick note that I told others earlier, this is being recorded. So those of you that want to watch this again, we'll be able to see this on the Navionics website under our webinar hot link. And because you're attending, you're also going to be getting a note from CITO regarding a free 60-day CITO trial, since this webinar is sponsored by our great partners at CITO. So moving forward, importance of having updated information. So this is St. Lucie. This is near my home. The St. Lucie Inlet to the left, you can see there's not a whole lot of data there. Reason being, just getting dredged. Off to the right, through a lot of people sending in sonar logs, we now have brand new contours. So again, safety is an aspect on getting out, but also trying to find those drop-offs and ledges. So let's talk a little bit about the contours and how to read these 1 foot contours and how to fish them. So the first thing I want to talk about is your ledges. So on ledges, you can see my green arrow here. Remember, each of these lines equals 1 foot in depth change. So anytime you see these thick lines like this where the arrow is, it's almost like somebody took a black magic marker and drew. This means your lines are close together. This is a ledge or a steep drop off. This again is important areas that fish will migrate to. It will hold bait fish. It provides structure. They can get up against the side of it and avoid the current. They can possibly hide underneath it if there's a cutout. But these are what ledges look like. And when you look at a chart, a lot of people say, well, I see all these lines, what do they mean? Further the lines are out, obviously there's not a lot of depth change. The closer it in, the darker that is, the more steep a drop off it becomes. So if you're fishing a ledge, a couple things to keep in mind. Our freshwater people, obviously you're gonna want crankbaits. They're gonna maybe run it off where it drops in. You're running a deep diver, you're gonna bounce it along the top. It's gonna drop off that ledge in a hurry. Your fish are gonna come off and eat that. Other times you're going to want to run right along that ledge. Potentially on a steep ledge like this, you might run it exactly along line of the ledge. It's going to come off, it's going to drop along that ledge, and fish are waiting. For those of in saltwater, I put 2 little arrows here. Your red arrow would be your incoming tide, or excuse me, your outgoing tide. Your green arrow is your incoming. Now, why is this important? We look at that depth, and that ledge, when I'm reading our chart, is coming off of a 21-foot contour and dropping down into a 32-foot contour. So we've got an 11-foot ledge that's dropping off. When you're trying to anchor or chum, let's say we're fishing for snappers or stripers, what you want to do on that red outgoing arrow tide is anchor about at the end of that point. Keep in mind that tide is going to push you that way for one, and you want to be sitting over top of that ledge. If you're anchored past it, you're fishing way beyond where the fish are. They're not even going to smell your bait. They're not going to see it. They're not going to see your jigs, nothing. So you want to anchor with that tide so you're sitting ahead of that ledge. And then if you're chumming, you put your chum over or throw your bait down, and the chum's going to fall off that ledge. The fish are going to come up to see what's going on, and they're going to find your bait or your jigs where you're sitting. Conversely, with the incoming tide on that green arrow, if you position yourself where the red is, you're past the ledge. You're not putting your bait where those fish are. You want to drop your anchor so that your boat's positioned about where that green arrow is. Now, a lot of people want to get closer. If you get right on it, you're okay. But if you hook a big fish, he's going to bust you off in the ledge. Your chum's going over the ledge. You're not going to excite them as much. If you anchor a little bit off, work the current, your chum, your baits, everything are going to flow into that ledge. Remember, that's a steep drop off. Those fish are tight to it. So your chum's going to hit that wall, and they're going to come out to see what's going on. You're going to pull those fish off of that ledge to you, to where your bait is and your lures, and you're going to have a better opportunity to catch those fish. Contours as far as a rise and a lump. Now this one's interesting. This is more of an offshore type of a scenario, which works whether it's for freshwater or saltwater. Here where my green arrow is, I have a 15-foot rise. It's a 15-foot lump that's coming out of 29 feet. Now, again, we talked about contours a little bit. You can see all the lines surrounding this lump. Now, those lines that go around it are indicating a depth change, and it's coming up to the lump. So this is where you can do the highlight we talked about. In this case, I might want to highlight, 15 to 20 feet. This one's going to pop out and show this giant white lump that's right there. But again, this is a piece of structure that fish are going to relate to. Now, how do we fish this? So I'm going to use, again, tide direction and also talk freshwater a little bit. Freshwater, your fish are generally going to relate to a current, or they're going to be on top of that lump. So fish are on top of the lump. Therefore, you might want to drift that, get on top of the 15-foot lump here, drop your baits down, and slowly drift over. Where you've got current, I kind of did the same thing here for you. Your green is your current direction coming one way, your yellow is the other. Now, how you fish this a little differently, with the green, that current is pushing up against that lump. So think about any plankton or bait fish that are traveling with that current. They're hitting that wall and they're getting pushed up. So they're a little disoriented. So your bigger, faster fish are generally going to be in front of that lump. They're going to crash those disoriented fish. They're going to be in there and they're going to feed. So when you're targeting active fish, fast-moving pelagics or fish that are on that active level versus a neutral level, they're going to be on the front side of that lump, or at least at the top of it, getting those bait fish as they get swept up with the tide or with the current direction. The one on the bottom, the yellow, I put that there because you've got a secondary lump. Now with that secondary lump, you may have fish in front of it as well, same reasons we talked about a moment ago. But you're also going to have fish that are on the back side of that. What happens is you've got that little edge that's back here behind it, that's a little dip in. That creates an eddy. So for example, if anybody knows anything about salmon or trout fishing and they're fishing creeks or rivers, fish will sit behind structure because it creates an eddy. Fish can sit there and relax, or fish can take advantage of the bait fish that have come around the corner, not suspecting a predator to be there, come out and hit that bait. So here you want to fish possibly on the back side of that because it's creating an eddy. That eddy in there is going to hold bait fish. That eddy in there is going to have fish that are waiting to pounce on something that's coming around the corner. Will they be as active, let's say, as a tuna or maybe a king mackerel that's in front? Possibly not. But in the back side, there's going to be fish waiting. You're going to have your fish that are just being lazy to possibly, in this case, maybe they're on the bottom. There's a piece of bait that you might want to soak behind this because, again, it's an eddy. Maybe there was a bait fish that came through, one fish cut it in half, the tail portion falls down to the bottom, it drifts into that eddy. This is, if there's anybody who fishes sturgeon, a lot of how they fish sturgeon, or catfish for that matter, is you'll get into that deep water eddy that's either a hole or around the edge of a current or behind structure. So current and contours is very, very important to understand how fish relate to it. Currents and contours and points. Again, this is an offshore point that's actually very popular near me. This one sticks out where the green arrow is. So we talked about way earlier how if you look at the ocean kind of as a desert where fish are going to migrate to structure, you look to the right of this where that green arrow is, there's really not a whole lot there. That point comes out and has drop off. See how thick that line is, like somebody drew a magic mark around the edge of it. Okay, that is your drop off. That's your ledge. That's where fish are going to hide. And then on top of it, you can't see really too well on this, but that comes up to about 194 feet. You got a lump on top of it. So you got a point that's coming out, got a lump on top, and you got ledges. Needless to say, fish love this spot. The current's coming, it's pushing bait up. So the aggressive fish are in front. You've got a little eddy that's in the back. See the little, right behind my arrow here, you've got a little eddy in the back. Right there's for the lazier fish that are gonna hang back there for injured bait or fish that are turning the corner. And you've got a hump. Fish are gonna sit on top of the hump. Now here, it doesn't matter if you're fresh or salt, fish always relate to points. If it's a long extending point, fish will move up on it to warm up, or there's a current that's coming over it, and that's where fish are sitting. So looking at points like this always is a great fish structure to look at. And again, you're gonna see that by looking at SonarChart and looking at those contours. So when you go on this, a lot of questions I've gotten in the past, and I should probably do one on side imaging, but this is what you're looking at in particular on my Ray Marine when I'm looking at fish and saying, what am I looking at underneath? So one of the things you can see the deep red on the sonar. The deep red is indicating hard bottom, rock or hard bottom. And for me personally, a lot of times I'm bottom fishing, I want to find that. So for one, I find that, I can find my bait fish. And look at that, the bait fish are actually up on top of the ledge, sitting there where there's a piece of structure. Game fish are up on top feeding on them because they're coming off the ledge, they're feeding the bait fish. And there's a little school sitting offshore further. Now that school, you can see the game fish school. They might be taking a break. The current might be coming that way and they're aggressive. I don't recall exactly the current in this particular scenario, but this is what you're looking at when you're down there. You can see that cloud, that's where the bait fish is. That's your bait fish. And then you've got your larger arcs, which are your game fish, and then your game fish school, which is larger arcs over to the left. The little buzz above the top is thermocline. That's often where your greatest temperature change is. And quite often fish will relate to that either just above or just below. In this instance, it's more about the bottom and the structure. But for freshwater, in particular salmon, or even in saltwater with salmon, thermocline becomes very important. So that's what we're looking for on the contours, to get a visual image of what's really on the bottom. Sandbars. So this is almost like a lump. And of course, sandbars, we saw earlier, 1, we don't want to run aground on. 2, can also be a great place to party. 3, can also be a place where fish hang out. What we call kingfish or ground mullet down south. Redfish, certainly. Stripers may roll up on sandbars. Now this one is obviously meant to be catered to both fishing and safety. But you can see the red arrow, contours coming up, 1-foot contours, to the 2-foot top of this sandbar lump. Off to the right-hand side, you can see the channel. Contours are dropping down, you've got a hole. That's actually a great spot. Truthfully, if I was inshore shark fishing, one of my favorites, that's a spot I would probably sit. I would anchor right off that sandbar, put my baits into that 25-foot hole. There's a good chance there's probably a shark or maybe a tarpon, if you're in tarpon territory, that'll be in there. A lot of bay fishing up north or in the mid-Atlantic states. I know they do some stripers and redfish, same thing. Sitting off that sandbar, there's a hole. Current's taking that down, the bait could roll into that and lay in the hole. The current's gonna be a lot less in that deeper water. Where it's shallow, bait's gonna roll, gets to the deeper water, it slows down and sometimes lays there. So that's where your presentation of just a cut bait laying is perfect, because that's what it's gonna do down there. It's gonna lay there because it's a heavy piece of bait and the current is less. Shoals, manatee, and speed zones. Those down here in Florida should be well familiar of manatee zones. First thing let's talk about on the left-hand side here is your shoal. We saw a screen image of this earlier where we saw a drying area. Drying area shoal is going to be in green. Be aware of that. Again, fishing location, but also you don't want to hit that. You're going to see in the other red, manatee zones and speed zones. There's a manatee zone in this case, January 1 through December 31st, 25 mile per hour. You don't want to be doing 40 miles an hour and have the sheriff stop you. Probably going to whack you for a $200 ticket. Slow speed all year, manatee zone, or it could even be just a speed zone. We've all gone under bridges and seen no wake, or we've seen 10 mile an hour, or we've seen this stretch of the intercoastals 25 miles an hour. Watch your chart. Navionics is updating these all the time. Nobody wants to get a ticket. It happens if we don't pay attention to this. I know quite a few that have gotten nailed in this particular spot, which is why I chose it. So speed zones, important. And no, of course, nobody wants to hit our friendly manatees. Holes. So 2 things on the holes is I made a few notes here. I'm going to use that one second on the fishing side of it. We have something called a community edit. Now you'll see my 2 little arrows up here with the little buoys that are pluses. Community edits are items that are added, and we saw about icons. So icons that are added from our Navionics app community. So we're now at, I believe, 6 million actually downloaded apps. Through those apps, people can add items to charts immediately. These buoys in particular were added and placed on this chart, and through an update is now on the plotter. So it's important to know those buoys. If they've moved, we don't want to hit them at night. We want to make sure we stay in the channel. So I've got those by the 2 arrows. Now the green X, I'm going to go to the next slide and explain this one a little better on how to fish this. So where the green X is, if the tide is going the direction of that red arrow, so the red arrow showing tide going this way, we talked about how the bait fish move, and we talked about a moment ago off that sandbar where fish are going to sit. So if I'm going to fish this particular hole, I'm going to put my boat exactly on that X. I'm not dropping my anchor in the middle of the hole and spooking everything that's in there. And otherwise, if I did, I'd be drifting out of the hole anyway. If I anchor on that X and I throw my baits back there based on the way that tide is moving, my baits are going to be sitting right off that ledge you see on the right that's dropping off and rolling into that 15-foot hole. Tide's going to push it in, and it's almost a slow slew. Where that X is sitting, you can see the contours kind of widening out a little bit into that hole. So the fish are going to sit there in almost like a tunnel. They're going to wait, just saying, feed me, sitting right there. So I'm going to position my boat at that X. Tide's going to take my bait back. The fish are in that hole. They're going to be waiting. And again, this is the key to reading the contours. You can see down on the bottom right, there's a bend. Look at that bend down the bottom where the bend is black. That bend is a ledge. Remember, black magic marker is a ledge, tight contours. I have to the left a black arrow. That is also showing docks that are there. And notice the one dock is sitting right by a 16-foot hole. That right there tells me you've got a hole, which is structure, and you've got a dock. 2 pieces of structure together, higher percentage, there's going to be a fish sitting there. Oh, and hey, I spelled anchoring wrong. I'm going to have to fix that on my next PowerPoint. Community edits. Talked a little bit about it a moment ago as far as buoys. But here we are on diving. You can see on the left here at Bessie's Cove, somebody's been very nice to give us a fishing location. And off to the right, we've got dive spots. So community edits also give you information about the local area that may not be yet on the chart. Changes. I showed you earlier about the black buoys that were added, which are special purpose buoys. Here you can see the red arrows indicate the old buoys, and this is actually by my inlet where they just finished dredging. The red arrows are indicating the old spots of the buoy. The green are showing where the buoys have been moved to. So the buoys were moved to maintain the channel edges based on the dredging. This happens, again, through a community edit change. And again, we talked about how many. We're about 10,000 edits per week as well on that. People are adding these all the time. This map is now a couple months old, so there's significantly more added to this than what I'm showing here. Dock-to-dock auto routing. This one is more of a safety item. This is available on our app and currently available on Ray Marine. What this allows you to do is say where you're starting from, put in your boat settings, say I'm going to start from this location and I want to head to my final destination on this point. With your boat settings on your draft, it will calculate the safest route and possibly the fastest route for you to get there. Now, of course, we could go faster and try to cut over some shoals, but at low tide, probably not a good idea. So here, it is calculating your route based on your boat settings. I point 1 to point 2, it gave me the route. One thing it also does is it sends up little warnings just to be aware. Here you've got the little orange triangles that are indicating there's a bridge. You're gonna wanna check your bridge clearance if you've got a sailboat or a taller boat or a flying bridge to make sure you're okay to go under that. Here's your check clearance that pops up when you click on that to let you know, check that clearance, make sure you're safe to go under that bridge. Also highlighting in red might be shallow water. In this particular area, this is a creek area. Shallow water, I've got a 3-foot draft. It's probably right at 3 foot, so it's mapping me through it, but it's telling me be cautious because it is very close to what my draft setting is. So especially helpful if you're going through new areas, it's gonna let you know. Platinum. So we'll talk about platinum charts. I love the platinum charts for, in particular, what I want to talk about is the satellite overlay. So I do a lot of offshore, I do a lot of inshore, I do some bass fishing, I do some freshwater. So I'm always looking at, you know, what else can an overlay show me that maybe the chart isn't quite telling me everything. So charts are always going to have navigable waterways. Now with Sonar logs through our SonarChart or SonarChart Live program, you can map these, but still in order to map them or find new places, you've got to see them. So platinum here on the left, on the left is our, what we call nautical layer. It does not have the SonarCharts on it. So you have a Nav Plus or Nav Plus regions. On your right is your satellite overlay. So on the top, I put on the satellite overlay. You can see all the little docks and the backwaters and everything else that appears. So this is important for your inshore fishery, or if you're doing freshwater, you're looking for docks to skip, pilings to fish, you're fishing at nighttime under lights. This is where it comes into play, where on the left, you're not seeing everything because it's not really navigable, you know, for major ships. The one I really like is the one on the bottom, which is the Alafai River. This one here, you look at it, solid piece of land. Not true. We throw a satellite overlay on here. There's, you can see with the red arrow, there's a lot of creeks that are running back there. So this is areas that I would go and fish for redfish, snook, might be looking for trout. I might find baby tarpon up in there. There might be some flounder in there. There could be some stripers. Again, depending on what part of the country you're fishing, this is important to know. Now, when you're up there, certainly you can record logs or do SonarChart Live and get your 1-foot contours and really understand what's going on. Tide drops low. Where's the hole they're hiding in? Tide's coming in. Where's the ledge they're sitting against? But this is opportunity to find new places to fish and explore new areas, map them, catch more fish, or go maybe where people don't know this exists. The Everglades and the Keys, you don't want to be down there without satellite imagery if you're not familiar with it and you're running in the backcountry. Vitally, vitally important. Good news is, I'm going to throw you a quick sales pitch. Platinum, next month, April, $30 off. So starting April 1, check your retailer. You can save $30 on Platinum. So there's my shameless plug here at the moment. So satellite overlay shaded down, another way to use it is in shading down, you can put your satellite overlay on shallow water or you can put it as full. If you shade it down, you can see on the right where my contours still come through. Where this is important is I can see a little bit of the reef, I can see a little of the bars, I can see the deeper water drop off. It's giving me, again, just a little bit more detail to really match with the contours and say, yep, there's that reef drop off, or yeah, there's a shoal right there. The contours are showing me, but it helps you understand, looking at it, just a little bit better about what the lines say. You know, it gives you a better visual understanding. You know, where that dive flag is, you can see there's a reef. You know, why would that dive flag be there? I can put the satellite overlay on, reef. I can see the ledge. Divers want to go along that ledge. Makes sense. So it just gives a little bit of a better learning curve instead of looking at lines, helps you to better understand what that line is really showing. lastly I want to mention is about the SonarChart Live, and I mentioned earlier about the creeks where you can actually produce your own charts and get brand new 1-foot contours. Available now on Raymarine and through our app if you've got a Vexilar or you've got a digital yacht, or if you've got a Gen 3 HDS, you can now go ahead and do SonarCharts Live. So SonarChart Live is actually where this particular example is actually Bark Lake up in Canada. I done a show up there with Bob Azumi, and we mapped this lake. Lake's not on any chart, never mapped, just a blue hole. So we went out there on the boat, went back and forth. We could go full speed. As long as we held bottom, we could map and instantly drew 1-foot contours. So a lot of the pros that are out there right now, what they're using it for is they may go into a creek that's not mapped, or they may just go ahead and fish. They pull up on a point, they turn it on, they motor around, they're fishing, they get done, they go to the next spot, they turn it on. At the end of the day, they may go back to that chart and they're taking a look and seeing if there's any nuances that have appeared. Hey, I caught a fish here. There's some new data, shows me there's a new ledge here, or there's a sandbar that appeared. I need to make a note of that and go back. So it helps to understand right away what's going on, or review it even a little later. So SonarChart Live is available through our app and again on some of the plotters. And again, 1-foot contours. So that's the end of our webinar for this evening. I want to say thank you for everybody that joined. At this point, I want to open up the door for questions. Everybody's been very patient. Thank you. I only see 19 posted so far. So I'm going to close out my sharing of the screen here, and I'm going to go ahead and start answering some questions. So if you would, again, I've got the little Q&A folder down there. I'm going to take a look at that and see what questions we have and do the best I can here and try to stay on. Let's see. It's, well, I did that in 45 minutes. Not bad. I'm going to try to stay on and answer as many of these as I can. I am going to end our video now just to conserve space, and we'll be able to answer a few more questions. So let's start here with, oops. Hang on a second here.